And welcome to today's webinar on Tencia Business Reporting. Let me first start off by thanking each of you for your attendance and the time you're giving us today to show us this new and exciting product. We really do know how important your time is to each of your businesses, so we appreciate your attendance. And that's why we hope a solution such as what you're going to see this afternoon will actually go a long way to making better use of your time, as well as to assist you making better business decisions and in your own business analysis. So let's get to what we're going to cover today, which there is a lot to cover. If we have a look, just what we do at the start is just give you a little background of where we've come to for TenciaBI, and so where we've come from and where we've come to. The from part is just the history of our products and interfaces with BI products. And then we'll step into more about what Microsoft PowerBI is, which is the chosen platform that we've chose to integrate with. And then get into how we actually implemented it within the Tencia application itself. And after me stepping through all the supplied pre-packaged content that I'll be giving a demonstration of, we'll just review some of the considerations that there are when you're implementing a BI solution such as this. Of course, at the end, there's going to be some time for some questions. What I will try and do as I step through the session is try and take any questions through the chat window that is provided in the Go to Training chat window. I'll try my best to get to it, but as I say, there's a lot of content to cover today. So should I not get to your question, I'll try and cover it at the end, and certainly any question that's in that chat window will be captured and taken up out of session if it wasn't covered today. So we'll start with a bit of the history as to Arrow and business intelligence and Tencia as well. It was some 5 years ago we actually started down a path of looking for BI solutions, and we did a little bit of work with a product called ClickView. Now, ClickView, we provided some pre-packaged content for that. It was a free desktop application, but in terms of its price point and its integration points with an application, that's just really where we got the feedback of where it struggled for uptake. So while we put that out there in somewhat as in a pilot sort of project, research project, we found that there were some limitations to that as an application. So it was some 18 months ago we made the decision just to go back out and see what products were available in that space, and it was 18 months ago where we found Microsoft PowerBI, and that 18 months ago was sitting in this Gartner chart that we see for analytics and business intelligence. It was sitting about number 3. So in the 18 months since we've actually chosen this application, it's continued its growth. It's now seen as the leader and the visionary as the software platform for BI applications. So, really pleased to see that we backed the right horse in that regard, and Microsoft are putting a lot of development and investment into it as an application. They have wrapped it up inside the Office 365 suite of products, and they're rolling it out seamlessly through that architecture that Office 365 provides. So that's where we've come from. So Power BI itself, Microsoft Power BI, there's a number of different facets to it, of course. There is a design aspect, and that design aspect comes via a free desktop application that you download from the Microsoft website. It's called Power BI Desktop. Now, I'll be showing you that shortly as part of a little case study I show, so you can see all the facets to the Power BI in architecture. So the desktop is where you do all the design of your content, where you connect all your data sets, and you go from there. Once you've actually got it into a form that's legible and you want to share, then you can actually publish it to what they call the Power BI service or Power BI portal. And that's where all your content's stored and managed, and that's up in the cloud. And because it's in the cloud and it's actually managed in the cloud, that means that you can actually then consume it via a number of different means. So there's actually local Windows desktop applications that you can install from the Microsoft Store for Windows 10 desktops. But, the most common ones really are mobile device apps from your app stores on your phones or on your tablets or, iPads, all those sorts of things. There's applications for Power BI from there as well. And of course, Microsoft offered a Power BI API, which is an interface for third-party developers to be able to connect to Power BI data sources and Power BI reports. So that clearly opened the door for a developer such as us to be able to connect to our clients' Power BI accounts and display the reports that they've got in their accounts within Tencia. And by us doing that, there are a number of advantages that we'll cover today as well. So if you actually have a look visually in terms of the architecture, we've got the Power BI desktop application that can be run locally. You publish that content up to that Power BI service and then access it via a number of devices. The other element to this architecture is a Power BI gateway. So given that Tencia would be an on-premise database under SQL Server, as it's on-premise, when you need to do the regular updating of the data inside those reports, there is a Power BI gateway that pushes that data up to the BI service in a secure environment as a Windows service that runs inside your network environment. It pushes the data out upon request and upon a specific schedule. So for BI reporting, it's a little different. You might schedule your data to be updated once or twice a day, at lunchtime or overnight, and those sorts of things. So that's what the gateway provides. But just to show you very quickly the power of Microsoft Power BI itself, even before we get into talking about the content that we're going to be offering with TenciaBI Core, we'll just step through a little case study and demonstration of Microsoft Power BI Desktop. So the application itself is downloaded and installed, and I'll just open up here. And it's not, for those who have done reporting in the past, it's not too dissimilar to other reporting tools in terms of its layout. You have a visualizations tab or a tools tab over on one side, which is on the right here, a list of the fields that you're reporting on. And for those that are using Office 365 applications, you've got the Microsoft ribbon here. So it's not too dissimilar to the Office 365 group of products in that way in its look and its feel. When we're talking about, and you would have read some of the marketing materials about bringing together your data from disparate systems, and what that really means is collecting all the data that you obtain through all the different sources in your business, and not just through Tencia, not just through your accounting solution, but through all the other means. There'd be many different data sources in each of your businesses, whether it's Excel, CSV files, from the internet, and all of these data sources are available in Power BI. And we use all of these, most of these data sets, data sources inside our prepackaged content that you'll see later. So we're using CSV files for a list of postcodes for sales mapping on a map of Australia. We're using a web connection to get up-to-date foreign currency rates from the XC website. And of course, internally, we've used Excel heavily in our own internal reporting, where we've done questionnaires via Excel through our business partner network. And when we've got the results of those questionnaires, we've brought them together with data from our Tencia accounts database, and we're being able to provide a business intelligence solution that brings together data that sits outside our accounting package, as well as the accounting package data as well. So very powerful in terms of bringing together that data from all your systems inside the one reporting solution. Okay, so you can join them all to each other. Before I'm going to show you today, we're just going to get a data source of SQL Server. Now that's where Tencia's database resides. It resides under a SQL Server. My server is just a local one, and on my database name, I just key in that information. And once I key that information, I've got the ability, if I'm a designer or coder, I can actually put in SQL statements that determine what data comes back. But for this simple solution, I'm just going to select OK just to import the data into this solution. And what it does, it goes off and makes that database connection, and it returns to me all the database objects that I can report on. So for the Tencia prepackaged solutions, we've created what are called SQL database views. We can see them listed there. But if we scroll down further, those familiar with the Tencia database structure would see all these Tencia database tables. Okay. So something we're all familiar with that I'll use for today's little example is just the data master file. So it's the customer table. And inside the customer table, we're actually wanting to write a little report. We'll write a little report on what money's owed to us as a business. Once I select that particular table, I have options to edit that data, and I won't open the editor today just because of lack of time. But inside the editor, you've got the ability to remove the columns out of that table that you don't want to see, join columns together, split columns apart, change data types, do replacements. So if you've got a database value of D, for example, you can change that, or G for GST, or R for retail GST, or you can actually do all that data manipulation in an editor. But for what I'm doing today, I'm just going to bring in the raw data straight out of the database by clicking the load button. Once I click that load button, you can see it goes off and starts bringing in the debtors master file data. Now, it's brought in all my rows, and if we have a look over on the right-hand side, we'll see all of a sudden the fields from that table drop in. We get the table name up the top. And when I drill down into that table name, we can actually see all the columns that are inside that table. Once we've got the data into the solution, it's not hard to start actually reporting on it. So it's a simple drag and drop. So if I pick up the customer name, for example, and just drag that into my report service, I get a list of all the customer names that exist in that database for my selected table. As I mentioned, I'm actually wanting to do an age trial balance type report of what's being owed. So I'll just start dropping in all the age balances that are owed to us from the customers table. Now, once I do that, you can see straight away that Power BI does things like automatic summing of the table at the bottom, and it automatically formatted it as a table. But this data I don't want represented in a table. I want it represented in something more visual. So with that actual table highlighter, I can then start playing around with the visuals that are available to us. So if I start clicking these visualizations in the visualizations tab, it starts changing that data into a visual manner that might be more applicable, or the way in which I actually want to read that data. Of course, there's many visuals here. There's more visuals in a developer workspace that you can actually download from a shop for free. And there's third-party developers always enhancing these visuals. Clearly, in this instance, for what I'm doing today, I think something like a bar chart is a pretty good representation of that data that we're talking about. So changing it to a horizontal stacked bar chart, we now have the data of what's being owed to us in the bar chart, with a breakdown of the age balances being the different colors. So we've got our customer names down the bottom, and then we've got our colors for the age balances. Okay. So that's basically just getting data straight out of Tencia, putting it into a report quite easily and in a very short amount of time. One of the things we can do is extend our reporting within Power BI. So we're not just talking about desktop reporting here, that because we have cellular devices involved, you can actually do designs for phone layouts. So if I just switch to the phone layout, I then get a visual representation of what the cell phone visual would look like. Now, if I'm having a look at a horizontal stack bar chart, that's probably not great for a phone because phones really navigate up and down. They don't navigate left and right. So we'll just jump back to our desktop layout, and we can do things like just make a copy of this particular visual. I'll just make a copy of it. I'll turn that one into a horizontal stacked chart because it's better suited to the phone. And of course, we can change visual properties and do a lot of advanced editing, which you'll see in our pre-packaged content. But for the sake of today's little case study, I'll just switch back to the phone layout, and I can just drop that into my phone. So I can say I want an age balance there. I can just resize it so I don't have to scroll so much on my phone, and that's finished. Okay, so now that I've achieved what I've wanted, I can actually, once I save that report, I can save that and override the report I have there. So it's just a called webinar. I've saved that report locally, and going back to that architecture that we stepped through at the introduction, I can then publish it up to the Power BI server. So when I click publish, it selects what folder I'd like it to go into, and I select a particular workspace. I've already got that data set there. I just replace that. And what that does is that's pushing that up to the Microsoft Power BI service from that architecture that we talked about. Okay. And once it's finished, I get success, and it says, got it. So once I say got it, I'll just bring in my phone. And once I bring in my phone, you'll be able to see it. So just just open up my phone. And when we have a look at my phone now, you see on the screen, we've got all my apps. The Power BI app's that nice bright yellow one. If I open up Power BI, I then jump into my account that I've aligned my Power BI account. I jump across to my reports, and here down the bottom, you'll see webinar, the report that I've just designed. And when I select it, I open it up on my phone, and it opens up the age trial balance visual that I just dropped into that screen into design mode. So that's showing you, when we talk about mobilizing your data, this is really that example of that. It's showing you how within a 5-minute window, we've got data out of Tencia and onto cellular devices. That doesn't just stand for Tencia, of course. This could be any data inside your organization you can push out to cellular devices using this as a platform. And it's one of its real strengths, even before you get to all the pre-packaged content we've put together for you. So in that way, you can just sort of see the power of it as an application. So I think just get rid of my phone now and jump back to our presentation. So that's Power BI in essence, in a very simple 10-minute explanation. You might be asking sort of what the Microsoft charge for all that. Well, as a Power BI desktop user, the desktop application that you design the content is actually a free application. But when you want to start sharing and collaborating that content, you actually start getting into the Power BI Pro account area. And that's $12.70 a month. And it's just important, as you see this on the screen, not to get too caught up in with the per user per month area, largely because of the way in which we've implemented this as an application. So because of our API interface into Tencia, basically the Tencia content that gets shown within Tencia only ever requires one Power BI Pro account. So if you only chose to display the content from Power BI inside Tencia, you would only ever need one Power BI Pro account. It's when you want to start pushing it out to your cellular devices, then you're going to have to review your security policies within your own businesses to determine whether you need maybe one other account for the sales team, one account for the warehouse side, one account for accounts payable and receivable, and all of their phones would use that one account to see that content. So you can really minimize the cost to your business by sort of structuring it in that way. But as I say, the $12.70 a month for Tencia is incredible value. So what did we do to integrate with Microsoft Power BI? So we started off with implementing a Google Chrome browser within Tencia. So in recent releases, we've actually put a Google Chrome browser into our application, largely because it allows us to display the Power BI content and render it in a really nice manner. So that was the first step. And inside that Power BI in the Chrome browser, we have a link that allows us to connect to Power BI accounts. Inside our system parameters for Tencia, we're accepting username and passwords for a Power BI Pro account, as well as a highly encrypted and serialized authorization key that sits between Microsoft and Tencia, the application. And that key is the handshake, if you like, between your businesses and Arrow Research Corporation that says that you're allowing the application Tencia to display your Power BI Pro reports. The real benefit, like I mentioned, comes in the way we've integrated inside our Tencia menu. As it's on our Tencia menu, you can push that out and secure that in any way you require. So if you're wanting to put a stock report on the stock menu for only those people who have got access to the stock menu, this sits as a normal Tencia menu item in that regard. So if you put the accounts payable and receivable solution, you'll see shortly in the cash book menu, then it means that those other people in all the other areas of the business aren't going to be able to see it because they don't have access rights. We have security levels in our menu, we have passwords in our menu, as well as role level menus inside Tencia. So because Power BI is included as part of that, you can roll out your own security to that content through our menu rather than providing individual SQL Power BI Pro accounts as well. Then we step to how we're actually sourcing that data for these for the content. I mentioned when I did that little example that we're actually putting together a whole heap of SQL database views. It's done this way. The BI reporting sometimes needs data to be remolded and reshaped to be able to be displayed in the way in which you want inside visuals. And because of the fact of that regard, we actually built a whole heap of different views that sit inside the Tencia database that populate when you're registered for the module. And once they populate, the content, the prepackaged content we provide, we'll source it from there. So the actual Tencia BI core part, so you've got your Power BI product we've just seen, but then you've got the Tencia elements, and that's what we're going to be showing you over the next hour is a demonstration of each of these solutions. So we're offering 2 Tencia inquiry samples. So the idea here is if you're thinking about mobilizing your data in that little example I used before, think about things like customer addresses, customer balances, stock pricing. Think about all those things if you've got a mobile sales force, if you've got a CFO or CEO that travels regularly. Having the function to be able to see a lot of that basic information very quickly and easily on a cellular device is really powerful. So we provide 2 inquiry samples for a stock and for debtors that allow you sort of to get started with your own design if you wanted to customize it, or just for you to get the concepts together of what Power BI is and pushing it out to cellular devices in that regard. But then we've got the more business analysis area, and that's the Tencia BI core content. And inside that, we've got a sales analysis solution, accounts receivable payable, financial reporting from General Ledger, and a stock management solutions focusing on sales and purchases. So that's what I'll step through today. But before I step through it, I just thought I'd show you what it looks like inside Tencia itself. So I'll just jump on. I'm in a Tencia session here. I've opened up our Tencia stock management solution. Now, I'm not going to go through this solution in here just yet, but I just wanted to show you some of the ways in which you work within Power BI that shows some of its benefits. So we'll use this as an example. So because it's on our menu, we also have the ability to add it to our favorites. So by adding it to our favorites, we mean that any of this BI content that you see today can be started when you start up Tencia. You can set flags on your user account, so when you log into Tencia, this content would be there automatically for you as the first thing you saw inside the application. Why is that important? It's because a lot of this information is going to lead you into what you're going to be doing behind it. So while this is a visual representation of stock valuation, for example, it might be the trigger point for you to jump into stock and do some further analysis or enter in transactions or do some further work on the stock module, but this is your starting point. And these dashboards and reports that you can build in Power BI are all going to be your starting point within Tencia. So we've got it on our menus there. We can put it on, I've just created a Tencia Business Intelligence menu there, but we can put it on any of the menus. What I wanted to show you some of the ways in which the real power of it comes by the fact that it's not a flat report. It's actually an interactive report, and just show you some of the things that you can do. So we're having a look at this now. We've got two pie charts there. We can zoom a particular pie chart by clicking the zoom button on the toolbar if we wanted to make it larger. We've got a number of different options where we can show the data, which brings the visual and the data that sits behind that visual into a table underneath. If you're doing presentations like I'm doing now, you can actually, if you wanted to highlight a particular visual, you can do a spotlight on that. You can change on the fly, change your sort order of the values that are inside that particular visual. Or you could export that data out to CSV if you wanted to be able to extract that data into a form that's taken up into another system. But where the real powerful interaction comes with BI content is in what they call cross-filtering. So in this particular report, we can see that we've got a stock valuation. Over on the right-hand side, we've got a list of all the stock items that we have as a business. We've got the quantity on hand, as well as what the stock value is across the entire business. In the two pies, here we've got a location, we've got a breakdown of stock value by warehouse and bin, as well as a stock category and subcategory. Okay, so by me selecting, just if I select Melbourne as the stock warehouse, what that'll do is actually change my entire report. So straight away, I get stock valuation specific to that warehouse. I get it then as a breakdown also of my stock categories, and subcategories are also highlighted differently to show us what the breakdown is of the selected warehouse that I've just clicked on. And that's where cross-filtering begins. So you can actually, by making a selection, filter everything else that else is on the report. In our days since sale or use value down here in the bottom left-hand corner now, it's actually changed specific to only items in the warehouse Melbourne, because that's what I've selected. Okay. If I take that out, it'll jump back in the day since sale or use goes to items from the entire business. But we can actually go further and go one step further. So instead of, we can do cross-filtering with a drill down. So if this time I'll drill down on Melbourne, and it takes me to the bin locations within that warehouse. If I take the drill down off and now I select a particular bin, if you have a look over on the right-hand side, my table is now listing for me items that are in a particular bin within that warehouse and what their value is inside that bin. So if you're sitting in the office and you're actually looking out at your warehouse and you wanted to say, oh, I wonder what's in that particular bin, you could very quickly find out what was in that bin and its value. And that's where the power of cross-filtering comes in throughout Power BI. Further to that, we've got drill downs and drill throughs. So they're multi-level. So if we jump back up to our top level, I'll just go back up to the warehouse level. But if we go back to there, we can actually drill down on specific selections. We can actually do a drill down all from the headline, from the title here. And just that you can drill down, but we can also do something called a drill through. So in our pre-packaged content that we've actually designed, let me just, in our pre-packaged content we've designed, you can actually right-click and we've put drill through pages in. So if I'm wanting to look at more information on this particular stock item, I can actually drill through to a page just for that stock item. And on this page, I get a whole heap of KPIs and for that particular item, a summary of sales in this solution, buy prices and balances and sell prices. So we have those drill through pages on each of our visuals as well, which is really powerful. So that's our drill through and drill all. The other areas to have a look at is tooltips. So on any of these visuals, something like a scattered diagram like this, you actually need the tooltips to be able to tell you what is sitting where. So this is a day since sale or use. Hovering over that particular dot tells me that this item in that warehouse has got nearly $13,000 worth of stock on hand, but it's been sitting on the shelf for 625 days. And what the last sale date is, what the last purchase date is, and what's the physical quantity that is sitting in there. So that's the tooltips area, and they're throughout all content. Another thing, and this is more specific to what we have designed, it doesn't come inbuilt with Power BI, but we understood that users would actually want to understand what sits behind each of these visuals. And for every page in every one of our solutions, so we've got 8 pages, I think, in this solution, behind it, if you click the eye, you actually get a rundown explanation of what's sitting in that visual. So we've taken the time out to explain that visual to you and its interaction with other visuals on that page as well. As I say, that's in all our content as well. So that's all I just wanted to show you in consumption mode there. I think I'll jump back out to the desktop again, and actually I can show you a little bit more being in the Tencia design desktop rather than the Power BI design desktop rather than Tencia itself. So behind each of these solutions I'm going to show you, there's a parameters that actually set up that solution. So this particular solution, the one I'm going to show you is the accounts payable and receivable. If I go to the edit queries and edit parameters, this solution's got a number of different parameters to it. So while we get our SQL Server database name and server name and our company code, this particular solution, we can change the aging being from the payment, from the transaction date, which you're familiar with in Tencia, to the payment terms date. And then from the payment terms date, we'll take the aging from that period. We've also got aging groups as well, so we've got the ability to change buckets. So inside Tencia, we've got age periods 1 to 5. We can actually change those buckets to be the days of owing and outstanding values. And in this particular solution, we're actually doing some forecasting. So you've got the ability to auto-generate automatic transactions from Cashbook, and instead of actually generating them in Tencia, you can have them generated for the sake of this BI reporting. And again, for all our content, for all our solutions, there are cellular pages for each of the pages in all the content too. Okay. So I won't be going through each of those cells. I'll be doing all of my demo in the desktop mode, and yeah, just to, you can understand that there are cellular interfaces for that as well. So if I get started and having a look at the accounts payable and receivable. Now this particular visual is showing us cash flow analysis and forecasting. So the yellow columns are actually showing us receipt totals, blue payment totals. So for any one period, you could see what the cash flow is. That wouldn't be too unfamiliar with people seeing, you know, their payments against receipts. What we've added here, though, is the ability to do some forecasting. So based upon the payment date on invoices, both in debtors and creditors, we're forecasting what money you would be getting in as being a payment or as a receipt. So if I hovered over something, if we have a look at December, for example, where we can actually see that the total receipts we've included in this visual is 1.5 million, but a breakdown of that shows that 1.25 of that's physically processed, so we have received that, but there's another 252 that is there sitting in accounts receivable, waiting for those invoices to be paid on their payment dates. And then, of course, on the flip side, you've got the same with the payments as well. So you've got the forecasting of payments. And you can, of course, filter that down, only show the forecasted values or the only processed, and you can sort of break down the months and the year as well. So as I go through each of these pages, I'll just show you the highlights of the page rather than every single visual, because we do have time limitations. The second tab on this solution is actually an accounts receivable tab, the money that our customers owe us. So we actually start, we're really just looking at this data table at the bottom, because that's what sources much of what we see on this page. So if I zoom that, you actually see it's an age trial balance there by customer, with the ability to drill down into the actual transactions if I wanted as well. So we get the ability then to see all the outstanding invoices for that customer with their invoice reference numbers and their transaction dates there and what age period they sit in. Okay, so that shows a lot of the data that feeds this page. We have top 10 outstanding invoices and top 20 oldest overdue invoices as well here. So if you're wanting to make a quick grab for cash, the largest value of outstanding invoices here in the orange up the top, it's debtor invoice 926036 for nearly $14,000. I hover over it, I can get some tooltip information, who the customer is, what the transaction and invoice dates were, what the customer order number was, and what the sales order number was in that instance. So I've also got the top 20th overdue invoices as well. So where the y-axis is the balance of outstanding on that transaction, and along the bottom is the number of days they've been outstanding. So this transaction's been outstanding for over a year because it's over close to a year. It's over 300 days. Hovering over it will give us the information about that outstanding transaction. Again, we can actually look at the highest value of transaction and how many days it's been outstanding for. And we've got enough information here to even pick up a phone and actually make a call about that transaction right away. Okay, so just jumping through, we've got accounts receivable. Now we're looking at accounts received, so the money's actually already been collected. So we get a detail of how much settlement discount we've given for any particular time. So I could select a particular year and see how much total settlement discount's been offered, what's been paid overdue, the average receipt values, all those sorts of KPIs are on the page. But what sort of appeals on this page is a receivables turnover ratio, as well as a bit of a review on the payment terms. So here we're collecting and counting how many receipts have been received from each of the customers, what's the average days of payment, how many of them were actually paid overdue, and then what the current payment terms are. So seeing the current payment terms would allow you to make a decision upon whether you need to change those payment terms. If somebody was paying regularly overdue, or their average days were over what their payment terms are, then you could actually do that review inside Tencia and change that. As I've been mentioning, for each of these solutions, we actually have got the ability to drill through, and it's for a page such as this. So the data analysis page is the drill through page. This particular page allows us to select a particular customer and then get some information on them. So from these slices, you can actually type in and do customer searching. So if I type in the word international, I get all the customers that got international in their name, and I'd be able to select them, or I could key in the customer code as well and get the and bring the customer up. Here we get a summary of where they rank in terms of outstanding balance, contact information, a review of what receipts have been taken, as well as via what method, a summary of accounts receivable, payment histories, and their outstanding balances down the bottom. That's the customer and debtor side. We jump across onto the creditor side for similar sort of reporting with an age balance and outstanding payables. From the creditor side, I like this area for potential payment discounts. So you talk about how does a BI solution save you money? Well, quite quickly, if you're actually getting offered settlement discount, this would really make sure that you don't miss on taking up those settlement discounts. So here it's telling us that we've got 6 days to take up payment of this particular invoice. And it's demo data clearly, so the dates might be a bit different, but we've got 6 days to take up this invoice, and if we actually pay that invoice, we'll get a $1,900 discount. This area is telling us we've got 1 day to pay and get a $262 discount. So in that way, if you're getting suppliers offering you those discounts, you can actually track and make sure that you don't forget about those payments there. Accounts paid is on the flip, so how we're actually making our payments to our suppliers. I think what's good to see here is we can see a lot of summaries, transaction counts, for example, miscellaneous expense payments, which is important, and the movement of those expenses over the years. So you can see the largest expenses. But I like the payment values from due date here. So BI is really good at showing you outliers. So in this example, you want to be paying your suppliers as close to the payment due date as possible. You want to hold on to the money as long as possible. You don't really want to be paying overdue. So everything on this zero axis here determines if you paid it on its payment date, that would sit on the zero axis. So everything to the left was paid early, everything to the right was paid late. So you'd be able to actually investigate why you're making some early payments. If I hover over this particular transaction was paid 55 days away from its payment date. It was for nearly $78,000. Now, in that example, we could have had that money sitting in our own bank account for an extra 2 months and earned more money on it. So you can do that sort of analysis and make sure that sort of you're keeping up with your payments. Creditor analysis is much like the debtor page, where you can select a creditor or a debtor. We've got a little breakdown of the payment history there as well for this particular customer, showing us the zero axis is horizontal area here now. Those transactions that were late is showing at the top, and those that were early at the bottom. And yeah, you've got a history and of KPIs and for payments made and those outstanding as well. This page is of course one of my favorites because we're doing something a bit different here. When you refresh your report, this report goes off and gets the latest foreign currency rate from the XC website. And by doing that, we're actually able to apply that to outstanding transactions that you have in creditors. So if you took a particular transaction, for example, I'll just look at this Edel one. It was entered at $817, and based upon the current currency rate on the market, we're $333 worse off because the currency's obviously changed in a manner that hasn't suited us, and we'll be paying a bit more because of that. We've got trend hyperlinks to the XE website to show you the trend of that currency as well. Invoice tracking is really used as a page, and we'll talk about in my introduction about saving you time. A page like this can do that for you. If you're chasing money, then this is a great place to start. So if I select accounts receivable, I've got the ability to do searches on invoices, order numbers, custom order numbers, and particular debtors and creditors. But we've also classified the customers and creditors into different areas. So high interest debtors and creditors will be those that have got an overdue invoice, those that have got cash on delivery and haven't paid, those that are flagged as bad debtors inside Tencia. Those type of debtors and creditors are considered high interest there. We can have a look at what held disputed transactions there are, as well as all the other debtors and creditors outstanding balances. If we wanted to make a quick cash grab, like I was talking about off that, I can on the fly change the sorting of this table, and now I've got the largest value outstanding invoice that we saw on the other page showing me here. I can hover over that, see the details for that particular transaction, pick up the phone and call that contact and ask why the payment hasn't been made and why is it 77 days overdue. So working through this is ultimately a to-do list for accounts receivable or accounts payable, depending upon which way you wanted to use it. We've been talking about Cashbook here, and we're talking about Cashbook here. It's actually complemented by the existence of a bank reconciliation. So this works in way, it's assuming you're processing a new bank statement within Tencia. It assumes that that's a new bank statement, and if you're actually looking at your cash flow and you're concerned about your cash flow, then it's a good complement to that is to have the bank reconciliation there for you as well. So that is all for the accounts payable and receivable solution. I'll just jump back in and continue on with the demo. We're back into the Tencia financial reporting, and that comes from our general ledger module. So this is a financial summary page showing us a summary of profit and loss and balance sheet information. So if we have a look here, we've got a number of different KPIs along the header here, from gross profit margin and net profit margins to return on assets and current ratios, debt to equity ratios, all the sort of KPIs that an accountant or a CFO might be interested in. And then we actually have a summary of our balance sheet and a summary of our profit and loss, comparing it with where we were at the same time last year. And we can actually see a breakdown by account type here. And this is really seen as the front screen. And if you actually were concerned about anything on there, you could then start to drill down into other pages in this solution. We jump from there, and I'll just jump into the balance sheet. So if you want to actually see a full balance sheet, well, that's available to you. And here we've got the ability with the balance sheet, we can scroll across just to see all values, select a particular period. We can scroll across, but we've got the ability here to do our drill downs and drill ups at a column level and a row level. So you can go, that's the highest level, you can drop down to the lowest level as well. So you actually can manipulate that report very quickly. And the same goes for the periodic profit and loss as well. So we've got a periodic profit and loss. The difference with this page is that we can go from a year to date, we can actually have it displayed as a period to date. So rather than a running total, we can just switch it in to be a period to date and actually see individual period balances. One of the advantages of doing this, of course, is that we can see that those periods where we might have a bit of an outlier. So in this example, we can see straight away for our direct income, we've actually got an outlier there for drama and romance for that particular period of October. But if we wanted to drill down into even more, this is what each of these pages drills down to another level inside your general ledger. So this is, it's termed a P&L analysis. And currently we're comparing 2019, which has been selected, versus the previous year. So the previous year shows in grey, the current year shows in blue. We've got the ability to show the current year as period to date or year to date, like on that previous page. And by selecting them, it changes our visuals to be a year to date running total. Or we can switch to compare it to budget rather than compare it to our previous year. When we do that, we get a KPI at the end of every one of these visuals, and it's giving us a comparison of how we've gone against our goal. So our goal is the previous year, showing us that we're nearly 15% up on revenue from the previous year. We're slightly down. We've got more cost of goods sold slightly, though. It's not too concerning, I wouldn't have thought, at 0.3%. And our other expenses are actually up, though, and they're up by 14% for this year. So you can see very quickly what areas are performing well against the previous year and what aren't. And this is, so I'll jump to the segment analysis. And the segment analysis in this solution is probably one of my favorite pages. Across all solutions, we're actually doing some branch analysis up here in the top. So we have a look at it. It's a year-to-date profit and loss by branch. So in this instance, we can actually see the branch name along the top. We've got two branches, East Coast and West Coast, and this can tell a number of different stories. So quite quickly, you can see that last year, the West Coast Central made up 30% of the total business direct income. This year so far, it's 35%, so close enough to 35%. So we've increased, 4 or 5% on direct incomes for the West Central. So they're having a better year. Have a look at East Coast. Well, East Coast are down by that same value. So the improvement in West Coast has sort of knocked East Coast back a little bit. But then you can also do other comparisons as well. So if you have a look at something like the East Coast, they're bringing in 65% of our income, but they're only making up 57% of our expense, which you'd be actually quite happy with, because last year their expenses really as close to reflected their incomes. But this year, actually, it's dropped even further. So they're doing a good job at minimising their direct expense or cost of goods, while the West Coast, they've jumped from 34% or nearly 35% to 42%. So they're actually becoming, their costs are increasing. Once you actually have a look at those as a summary up the top, you can start drilling into that down the bottom here. And with direct income selected, you can actually start having a look at how each of the general accounts are performing in your general ledger. So quickly, very easily, I can see that the last year to date rank for, this company sells DVDs. For the children and comedy category, it's gone from 8 last year to 3 this year. So they've really improved on last year in terms of their sales values in direct income. We can actually then go further down and see ones that might have gone the other way around. So if you have a look at something like sales of comedy, or if you have a look at action and adventure, well, it's dropped from 6 to 8 in that example. And that's reflected by these data bars we can see here being in the red. So that because they've gone backwards, you can actually really see them quickly, what's gone backwards and what's gone up, by those visual representations in those data bars. Again, if you want to drill down even further, this is a great page to show that cross-filtering analysis as well. So we're having a look here, and I've made multiple selections. You can select balance sheet accounts or profit and loss accounts here. I'm just having a look at all income here by selecting direct and other income, and we can actually see how we've performed this year against last year. Last year showing blue, and the grey is being showing as our budget, all inside the one visual. So because we're cross-filtering, we can break that down, right? So we can see we're actually performing not too bad as a whole on this year, and we're mostly up on last year outside of one particular period. But as you start breaking it down, you can see the particular general accounts within the selections as well. So if you actually want to have a look at how one's performing, and we looked at comedy and romance. Comedy and romance on the last page we thought went down. So if you have a look at the visual up the top, very quickly shows us that last year to date rank was 12, it's gone to 9. So you can actually see that the orange is sitting above the blue the whole way through. And sort of we've improved on budget to this point in time. If you have a look at one that shows in red here, action and adventure that we were talking about before, we now then get to see that the orange now falls below the blue line. So here you can see quickly, well, this clearly is struggling compared to where it was at last year, and we've actually dropped below budget once already this year. Okay. And you can do that for all the different account types, and you've got filters there to break up your general ledger chart of accounts as well if you want to show up for particular departments, particular branches, or particular sections as well. The last page we have is a subledger transactions. It's for those data nuts that like to see where the data has come from inside Tencia and where it's been posted to. So you've got the ability to actually do a query on a source transaction from the source modules within Tencia. If you wanted to see where a particular invoice posted, you could actually just do a query in here, type in the reference number that you had. I'll just select a particular invoice, and actually when you do your query, you can see that this invoice had posted to these accounts in General Ledger. And then that way you get to see a good representation of your data from there. So if we just move out of the financials one, the next one I'll step through is actually the sales analysis, and this is sort of really suits the BI environment really strongly. We begin again with the general sales summary page. So what we like doing is putting a summary page on the first page of the content, and then allow you to make the decision of what you need to drill in behind it. When we have a look at this, we're actually looking at comparing last year to date for sales revenue, sales units and profit along the top here, but the whole page is really comparing how you're going against last year with some profit margin calculations in terms of percentage done in this visual here. Here though, we can see the green line is where we're at that last year to date. The yellow bar is where we're at this year to date, and then if we're actually going to get to the end, where we need to be at by the end of the year is at the end of the dial. And the same goes there. That's broken down by sales location and sales code as well. Jumping through to some of the more content, this is again a great cross-filtering page. If we have a look, we've got basically a monthly sales analysis here for the entire business. So what we're seeing in this graph here is all the years of sales one against the other, from 2015, from August 2015 through to where we're at in July 2019 in this specific data set. And we can see how we're performing as a whole across the entire business. And we can see the current month sales against the previous month sales, the current month sales against the same month in the previous year, and then we get a monthly sales history. So we're in April now. I haven't made any selections. So we're actually in April. We see that in April, we're actually well up on all the previous Aprils. So, big tick there. We're performing well. It's the best April we've had in 4 years. Then you actually can see, well, actually, this is the 4th best month we've had in the last 5 years in terms of sales. You can see the current month's sales versus the average sales value for a month, as well as the current month against the average units. And that's great as a whole business. But then you can start drilling it down. So here on the right, we've got stock category sales year-to-date variances, and you can start to see which categories are performing well, which ones are performing poorly. And once you select one of these, we then start looking at the rest of the page now becoming a specific report to that stock category. Now we can see that this category of adventure was 119%, so we're doing well overall this year to date. The current period, we're not going so well on the previous month, but if we have a look from the previous year, we're still well up on the previous year, which is why we've got a year-to-date percentage of 119%. And then we actually got the top 5 sales periods for this particular category. And we can see that this particular month, April, isn't in there. So while it's in the top 4 overall, this month isn't as quite, isn't reflecting that as a general business. Again, I can expand that selection. And I'm not only looking at stock category level, at this time I actually select a particular item. So these are my movies and the DVDs. If I selected this Treasure Island, then I actually get the report to be specific to that stock code. And I could see whether that stock code reflects what the category is doing and the overall business trend. And here we can see we're down on the previous year with the red straight away. We can see April 19 is down slightly on where it was in 2018. And then we can see all the top sales periods for that particular DVD over time. So clearly it might be an old movie. So in 2016 and 17 it was going all right, but sort of in 2019 it isn't performing quite as well. You can do all that off the one page. Then we start looking at some of our sales trends. When I talk about sales trends, we skip through, and the trends page can be specific to any different industry, but it's really sort of broad. So up the top here, we can see a cost of sales trends here. So what we've got is sales value showing in the blue, the sales cost showing in red, with the total profit in yellow between. I like this just as it gives you a broad overview of the business over the last few years. Now what you can see is straight away, I think you can see the troughs all seem to be in August. So if you have a look at August, they're all dipped straight away. You would be able to recognise that August is probably not a great month for this particular business. And then we can see, well, actually, there was a few spikes of cost throughout 2017. and you'd be able to understand what those costs were, and you'd be able to sort of reconcile why those spikes occurred back to what was happening in the business at the time. Down the bottom, we have a daily sales average as well. So if you're in retail and you want to actually work out what days are your best trading days, here it tells you what the average sales value is per day of the week. So this company clearly wouldn't work many weekends, I'd say, based upon this. But those who work 7 days a week might find that sort of information interesting. We've got seasonal sales breakdowns here, where you can actually get a breakdown of sales made through the season. So those in fashion, or manufacturing of clothes, those sorts of things would be really interested in something like a seasonal sales report and breakdown of those seasonal sales. From there, we can jump into a map sales area, and this is great visual, works really well in sort of demo if you're sitting in front of boards, but if you actually wanted to see a distribution of sales throughout Australia and New Zealand, you can do from this map. Okay, so I can zoom in and zoom out as I'm showing you. And what we're doing on this page is we're mapping all sales made to Australia and New Zealand. We can do that via the existence of postcodes that that can be linked into the Bing maps here that we're actually using. So as we look at a particular area, I'll just zoom in on Victoria. Each colour is a different sales code. So if I hover over the orange colours, they're always going to be the sales code of referral sales. And the larger the circle, the larger the sales. So there's clearly a large sale made here to JB Hi-Fi. It was 634,000 with a huge quantity there. So you can actually see the larger sales being represented in large dots. We can zoom in, as I say, to any particular area, or we could search an area as well. So if you actually wanted to search a particular suburb, like I live in Airport West here in Victoria, and if we do a search on Airport West, I can actually jump in, and it straight away takes me to that particular suburb, and I get to see the sales made into my local Westfield, who made the sales, what the value was, and I can do those sorts of things. So you've got great power there to be able to map your sales on a map of Australia on that page. Okay. Moving forward, we've got a what's hot, what's not. So what we're trying to do in some of the BI solutions is offer you something that extends out on the reporting you get within Tencia, but something also that you might want to start and build off. So here we've tried to build in an algorithm that gives a star rating to each of the items within the system, within each of the stock items. So if the monthly sales value exceeds the sales average and exceeds the previous month sales and exceeds the previous year sales, and that the year-to-date sales is improved on the last year-to-date, then you actually start getting you get a star for each of one of those metrics that are met. So by doing it in this way, you can really quickly see what the high-performing categories are and what the poor-performing categories are. So those that are cold are down the bottom because they don't have any, they're not actually meeting any of the previous targets. You can see that's why they're shown in red here at the bottom. But those that are actually performing well, you can actually see them with stars here. So you can again drill down to a stock item level here and see what items are performing. So the animation category is performing well largely off the back of this particular item at the top, because not all the other items are 4 stars. But this particular item's been the big performer inside that particular category, and that's why it's got 4 stars. So you can actually use that page for that type of quick analysis. We have a stock item details page where you can actually select a particular stock item. So I think I was it Venture Island, was it? Yeah, so you can actually search items. I'll just select a particular movie and see how it's gone. We can actually see the customers that movie was sold to, the sales rank of that particular movie. In this case, the transaction analysis. So we actually have a look at when the last sales date was made, average sales, customer sales, profit margins on it, how many transactions there's been, and with a full summary of sales there. We can jump to a stock comparison page where you can compare one stock item against another with a whole heap of different transaction analysis there at a stock level. So you get to see profit margins and average sales quantities of one item against another. Some of the questions, guys, this is probably a pertinent time to take some of the questions. One of them off here has been, can you drill down further to subcategory or the supplier? No, you definitely can. It's not in the default build of our content, but that wouldn't be any difficulty in actually just dragging that field out into that level to be able to drill down to another level again. So the filtering of that is quite easy. As we move across, we've got a page that's really designed to highlight the cross-filtering capabilities within Power BI. So we're actually having a look. We've got all our stock categories in stock on the left and all our customers and customer types on the right. So if you want to see what the Kmart and franchises are buying, then you can select the customer type Kmart and franchises. And on the left, you can see at a category level what they're buying. If you want to see at a stock level what they're buying, you can drill down to stock level, and you'll be able to see the items they're actually selling the most of there. And again, you can flip that on its head a little bit, and on the right-hand side, you can actually drill down into particular customers, and then for each individual customer, start using your cross-filtering to see what values are being purchased for particular stock items in that case. We jump more forward, we've got a customer sales page. Now, I really like this page. There's another page that offers you something a little different. And we talk about value of a BI solution, and it's in things like this. It's in things like your inactive customers. So here, we've done some analysis here, and we're looking at customers and the average days in which they purchased from us. So a customer like Brinks, in this example, they were buying from us once a fortnight, but they haven't made a purchase from us in 259 days. So right away, it's actually, this is sorting by lapsed days, descending. So those customers who are lapsing from you by the most number of days are going to come up to the top, and it would allow you then to get in contact with that customer to see why it is that they're actually gone from buying once a fortnight to now no longer buying from you nearly in over half a year. You can see what the last year's sales values were and what this year's sales values were. So this is really showing you your poor customers where you might be able to retain business from previous customers or investigate what's happened there. And then you flip that on its head and you actually got a new customers area. So we've got all the accounts that have been created, the latest account created dates it's sorted by, and we get to see quoted values through sales orders, the value of last order, and to make sure that if you've got account creations happening, to make sure that you follow through and get the sale. They might have an amount sitting in this quoted value, and you actually need just to follow them up to see why they haven't made the purchase. Again, getting more money in and putting real value into the BI solution. We've got some analysis here. We've got number of customers from this year to last year, so it's counting customers and counting transactions in here, and the average number of transactions per customer. So here it was really saying that last year every customer had an average of 15 transactions per customer. At the moment it's only at 8. So while we might be selling more, our sales might be up. They're actually just buying buying more in one particular transaction rather than buying more regularly in that instance. We can move forward. We've got a customer details page, which is sort of the flip of the stock page. We've got a summary of what items that particular customer has bought in a report up the top here, highlighting very quickly what would be the favourite purchase on a pie chart down the bottom, with the monthly sales history, how it sits in each of our different customer types and sales codes, transactions analysis of when and they last bought, how many transactions, and the average profit margin, those sorts of things. We've got sales that were actually transferred into job costing, the module, and we've also got sales that were non-stock items, so those two income expense codes within Tencia as well. So we can actually see the average sales units and the revenue made from those items as well, with the top 20 incomes, so sales items there as well. So the last of the solutions to step you through is the one we sort of started down on the path within Tencia, and that was our stock management solution. And the stock management solution, we saw the stock valuation that I was showing you earlier, so I won't cover that again. But the stock management solution is really for those looking at warehousing, looking at an analysis of your own warehouse as well as your suppliers. So as we step through, we can see we've got we've got a stock page where we select a particular stock item, and that'll give us a summary of how that item's performed. So if I select a particular item, this is the standard Tencia demo data set here. We get an analysis of the sales made for that item, the balances, the buy prices. Now, what this does is actually doesn't look at the cost. It's physically the buy price. So we're actually looking at the buy price against the sell price of the item, not necessarily the average cost in that situation. We can see sell price analysis here, what the minimum sales price was, the maximum sales price, what we sell it at an average at, and the median as well as this medium sales price, and what the current pricing is too. So if you're doing some pricing reviews, you've got that ability in this area to see that information really quickly. You're analysing those transactions in a quick manner just to see. So that's from a sell perspective, and then you've got the same at a buy perspective on the left here. For those who are using serial batch tracking, and there's quite a number of Tencia sites using that, we have a serial batch tracking analysis page here that allows us to actually do some work based upon expiry dates on the serial batch item. So while we're looking at stock valuation on the main page, we need to adjust it here because we've got $107,000 of stock on our shelves that have expired that would be no good to sell. So we need to write off this value. So you actually start then to drill down of what items actually have expired, and you can actually see this is a particular monitor. If I drill down into that monitor, I get a list of all the serials and the valuation of the particular serial numbers that need to be written off. So if you need to write it off, you can go and find those serial numbers and actually start the writing off process. But before it gets to that stage, you want to get rid of the stock before it gets to that stage, and that's where the useful life profiling comes in. So especially if you're somebody in the food industry, I really appeal to, where an item is produced, it's got a lifetime. So once it's produced, it might have a lifetime of 30 days. What this tells us is what percentage of stock we have on the shelves, what percentage of its life does it have left. So if it's just been produced, then you'd be sitting at everything in it would be would be in the blue, which would have 75 to 100% of its life left. Okay, if it's grey, it's saying in this instance, 100% of the stock of this item is sitting between 25 and 50% of its life. So if something had 30 days full life expectancy, then it would mean that this item is sitting at somewhere, if it was 30 days, it would be somewhere between 15 and about 10 or something like that. So if you have a look in that instance, you can actually then start to move the stock that you want. So actually wanting to drill down into that, you can actually select the items. You can see there's items that are redlining here for this particular item, which means it's less than 25%. So, you know, when you go to Coles and Woolies and they've got your discounts on it, it's because that item's nearing expiry date. If you drill down on it, you can actually then go and find the particular cereals that are red. So as I move through, you can actually go through and say, okay, well, these are the serial numbers that are red. They're the ones that we would need to discount and get out the door before we have to write them off. So it's a powerful visual from that perspective, making sure that you don't write off as much stock as you need. Here we've got an area as well, if you want to do product recalls, where you can actually just query the database for a particular serial number, and it'll return the item for you and all the usages of that item. So it'll tell you where it's been used, either in production or whether it's been used in a sale as well. This is one of my favourite pages on this solution because it analyses our own performance in terms of our sales order shipping, where we've got a mapped sales area for our mapped shipments there. I think if I select that, we can actually see our map populates when I select the year to see where our shipments have gone to currently this year. And then we get to see, once we hover over that map, we get to see some analysis on the shipments to that area. So we're looking at Hawkeburn, Victoria here. There's been 48 shipments, and the days from order to shipment have been just over 20. The days from order to delivery over 20 as well. But this is a great visual here, and this is what this page and sort of some analysis on the suppliers is all about. We have a look here. We're actually counting how many shipments were in that particular month, and then those in red were late, those in pink were only a day late, and then those in grey were on time. So from this, we can actually determine how we're performing in our warehouse and getting their stock out. And what's important too is the blue and these yellow lines. So the blue line's determining how many lines have been shipped in full. So that's individual lines themselves. So were you able to supply all the stock that they ordered on that one line? Then the yellow line is, were you able to supply all the lines in the order together in the one shipment? And it shows you the percentages of that. Now you're wanting to save money in warehousing or in shipping processes, then this is a great visual to do that. You'd be able to analyse why you haven't been performing or getting your shipments out more closer to orders in full of 100% to minimise the number of shipments going out the door. Now, you can actually start that process from here. Again, we've got the shipments by location, category and item, which I can drill down to. And further to the previous question, you'd be able to add in subcategory to this as well if that was being used, or an area code into the customer type if you wanted to do that as well. We get a percentages here of lines shipped in full, how we're performing over time and entirely, and just an overall perspective of how our shipping is performing. On the flip side of that, we were actually going to start doing some analysis on our suppliers. So we actually wanting to buy an item in, and we're actually wanting to do a comparison of how one supplier performs against another. If they're telling us it's going to come in 14 days, well, let's just check to see whether they're actually accurate when they tell us how many days. So here we actually got a count of the orders from each supplier, the average units received on those orders, the average days of receipt from that particular supplier, so how many days on average does it take to get there, what percentage of orders have been received in full, what lines have been received in full, and what lines have been late. So, for example, this supplier, very good in terms of its percentage of orders in full and lines in full, but maybe that's because they're receiving 70% of them late. So maybe they're holding back shipment because they haven't got all the items, and actually they're shipping items late. So they're delivered in full and on time. KPI is only at 36%. So you can do that for the supplier overall, but you can actually drill down and have a look at how they perform delivering you a particular item, if that's what you're actually wanting to get sourced. So here, those items with a star are those where that supplier is flagged as the preferred supplier within Tencia. But then when we get all those same KPIs at a stock level, and we can see how they perform there. We've got some lead time analysis reviews if you're setting lead time days inside Tencia as well on that page. Furthermore, to some of the supplier analysis, we actually got the ability to select a supplier. So if we're looking to buy from a supplier, then we'd start this process by selecting them on this page. Once we select them, we get a history of how many transactions we've purchased from them. We get an analysis of their lines. They've shipped all in the line that we saw before, where they're down in full on time was at 36%, average days receipts 24. We can see what items we buy off them most regularly as well. But this is really doing analysis not only on how that supplier performs of this particular item, which is what we saw on the other page, but we're actually also including how they're pricing their items to us as a supplier. So here what we got the ability to do at a stock level is to see what the buy price has been, the average buy price has been for a particular transaction against the average buy price for that particular supplier, and the average buy price from all suppliers. So if I drill down into that, we actually will see a list of the transactions. I'll do this item. We can actually get to see a list of the orders that we've got from a particular supplier. So this supplier we've been supplied the item to Tencia on each of these orders here. We can get an average number of days for receipt, and we get to see which ones were delivered in full and on time. But more importantly, looking at the price, we can see that on this transaction, they charge us nearly $5 more per item. On this transaction, they charge us more than, nearly $30 more than they usually do on that particular transaction. And then you can compare it to all suppliers as well, and how their supplier price rates against other suppliers here in this column. What I like about this page is cross-filtering and doing some analysis on the supplier prices. So as I select items on this page, if you look in the top right-hand corner, what I haven't shown you is the comparison of what the buy prices have been from each supplier over time. So if I jump into that item we were looking at then, we can actually see everything in orange is this particular selected supplier, but then we've got all our other suppliers in the system listed here and what the buy prices were of that particular stock item I've selected down the bottom here. So in November and February, we bought off a supplier, the grey one, which is BN0001, and their buy price was actually quite low, near $1,500, but we never really bought from them again for some reason. Then we actually got a high price there, being AS0001, but so you're saying that the selected supplier sits above or around the same price as most other suppliers, if not just slightly more expensive. And you can actually see some transaction history, what the quantity was and what the buy price was for those transactions. Another important part to stock, of course, is the reorder analysis, and that's what this page focuses on. And what it basically does is to put together an algorithm for your stock procurement. So we understand that every business generally would have different algorithms that they apply to what they need to order in terms of replenishment of stock. This is seen as a template that you'll be able to expand on if you wished, and we've just tried to put in as many options as we can to to put the stock in to look at the stock that you need to buy in as quickly as possible. So we have a look across them. We've got different buckets. So we've got the obsolete bucket. Those items in Tencia flagged as obsolete. We've got the out of stock bucket. Those items that have got a back ordered quantity or have sold into negative. And then we've got an out of stock risk. And this is those items that are sitting between 0 and the minimum stock on hand that are inside Tencia. And you'll be able to see those quickly. The desired level are those items that have got stock on hand that sits between the minimum and the maximum that are specified in Tencia, and overstocked is greater than the maximum. If you're not using those fields, we've expanded those buckets to include some of the calculations we're using. So if we have a look at something like this first item here, this is a good example here in out of stock risk. So this item 1 stat here, we've got an on-hand quantity. If you look at the first row of this, we've got an on-hand quantity of 16. An available quantity of 16. The average sale or use quantity is 4. So on any one transaction, the average use is 4.32. So that says to us, because we've got 3 available transactions, we wouldn't be able to quite meet 4 transactions based upon that average use. So that means that we've got available transactions on hand of 3. And based upon an analysis done of all the sales, the days between sale or use is 21. So that's able to tell us the days since sale or use is 209. So what we're able to do based upon those figures is put together an estimated days of out of stock. So this first line is telling us that we estimate you'll be out of stock of that item in 63 days because it's purchased from you in every 21 days and at an average quantity of 4.32. And by doing that, we actually can use those metrics as a way in which for you to also put stock into different buckets. So if you're not using those fields on the stock master file, you can actually set a minimum desired level or number of transactions if you wished in that example. So you're saying that desired levels, desired buckets, you can use these sliders. You can move what sits in the desired level depending upon the average available transactions and the days of out of stock as well. Then you can actually start looking at some of the reordering, and a lot of this is in Tencia and process order generation. We've moved it into here as well. So if I hover over one of these items, I'll choose that item we're looking at first. We can see the tooltip here, and it's giving us a little breakdown of the sales and the last 12 periods of sales for that particular item, and a breakdown of how much is already on order, the next stock due, the next quantity due is in this tooltip. But for reordering, we get that panel along the left, and it shows reorder calculations. It's saying we need to order 7 to meet minimum stock on hand on the master file, and we need another 7 to meet the sales quotation quantity if we've got quotes in the system for that item. And from there you can choose, well, what is it we need to move? So what is it we need to order for? And that's where this reorder coverage comes. If I want to actually do sales coverage, I can select, let's just say I want 1 sales period of coverage in ordering, and I want to use the last 4 periods to average of sales as my quantity to reorder. Now, I've got a suggested reorder quantity here. If I click sales coverage, it's going to use those metrics I've just selected to recalculate what the suggested reorder quantity is if I want to cover the next 1 month of sales using the last 4 periods of sales history. And what we can see here in this particular item, I can drill down to show you, is that we've got a suggested reorder quantity of 10 for that particular item that we were looking at. Now, when we have a look over to the right, you can see that the minimum stock on hand was set to 7. So that's why it's there's a reorder quantity of 5 for that particular item in Tencia as well. So you can only buy it in lots of 5. So rather than buy 7, you have to buy 2 lots of 5, being 10. So you actually can see that data down at a warehouse level there for reordering. We have another page here, which is the allocations as well. So this is called active transactions because you can actually filter it to see all the allocations for a particular stock item, all the back orders, any job estimates that are open, anything that's on order for a particular item, or quotes with your stock code filters, location filters, and category. And again, you could add subcategory just by dragging it out onto the form there. So that's really the stock solution. And so we'll just jump back into our presentation, just proceed. So as we're talking about, there's quite a large bit of content there. I could have gone much further into detail on each of those, but you can see there's huge value in what you'd be getting in BI Core. The next question we usually get at this point is, well, how much does all that content cost? It's introductory pricing at the moment. It's $3,500, and that's for those sample apps that I was talking about for the data and stock inquiries that you can use to mobilise your data. Then there's the integrated content within the Tencia menu, saving you from having multiple Power BI accounts. The integration through the API into Tencia is a benefit there. And then you get those 4 content solutions that I've just gone through, as well as some ongoing enhancements and updates. And we're always making enhancements and updates. We're working on another solution that would slot into the TenciaBI core at the moment as well. So you get access to those that sit within that as well. So I think as we work through there, I really hope people were starting to get an understanding of what's involved and some of the considerations that they would have if they were implementing it themselves. We have a look. The very first thing I just want to make clear is that Arrow acknowledges that I've been doing this for quite a while, and so has the business. And no one business has the exact same reporting requirements as another. Different industries have different requirements. And even inside the same industry, different people want different things out of their reporting. That's why it's one of the hardest areas to get right. Now, what our goal is to get our reporting as close to that 100% of your requirements as possible and meet with all the common requirements. But we have to acknowledge that there's some level of customization. Going back to the question where somebody wanted a subcategory, for example, that's the sort of thing we're talking about, is that we acknowledge that there's going to be some level of customization that's going to be playing a part in your implementation. The other point that I've talked about, the multiple single Power BI accounts. Just remember, if you're only ever consuming it within Tencia, you only need one of those. And then sort of just need to do a little review if you're actually publishing it out to mobile devices as to how many Power BI accounts you would need there to group the content. But another important thing is the old rubbish data in is rubbish data out policy there. And we're talking about data cleansing. And we've done an analysis of a lot of data sets we actually get into our office, and it's incredible to see the changes of data over time as one, but it's also the inconsistencies of data from one day to the next as well. So I'm mentioning that as part of this is because BI really shows those outliers very quickly. So if you aren't using postcodes correctly in sales transactions, you're not going to get a nice sales map in the sales solution. And they're the sorts of policies that you need to start to possibly work on to make sure that your data is consistent and you're capturing the data in a way in which you actually want it to have report coming out the other end. Now, that may mean using our user defaults. So inside Tencia, you right-click on a field and you actually can set a user default so that this field is mandatory, or this field has to be bypassed by certain users because they keep changing it and I don't want them to change it. So you've got all sort of those mechanisms to help improve the data cleansing as well. So that's really all I had to cover in what is a really exciting product and solution to be able to offer you. It's a very easy demonstration to do because there's just so much to show, and it's quite visual, and you can really see the benefits and the power of not only the content we've put together, but what you would be able to do using it and putting it into your own hands from a development perspective. So I'm happy to take any questions if they're coming in off the chat window. The other thing to mention too is sort of at the end of this session, you'll just have a 5-question feedback sheet. If you could fill that out, that'd be really appreciated. But otherwise, it doesn't seem I'm getting too many questions in off the chat window. So I'll call the session to an end. And again, thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon and you've enjoyed what you've seen here today. If you need any further queries, get in contact with your Tencia business partner, or we can raise those questions through us in this session as well. So thank you.